Some of the best results is not just from the students, it's from the staff that they go, I can work with any kid now. I know what to do. To watch a paraprofessional say, oh, I got this. I know exactly what he needs, empowers a classroom. And if you can shift the mindset of a classroom, you've changed the outcome for every student in that classroom for the rest of their life.
Nothing centers a child's dignity and autonomy and agency more than helping them communicate effectively and be understood and develop skills.
We know at least 90 students have received the intervention to like a level of fidelity. So across the cumulative years that we've been doing this, we've kept 24 students within their homeschool setting.
The feedback we get from trainees is that it fundamentally shifts their practice for children. Nothing more persuasive than seeing kids succeed in ways they hadn't before.
Hello, we're here today with Dr. Brad Hendershott and Hillary Flood from Columbia Regional Inclusive Services. Hillary and Brad, hi, how are you doing today?
Good morning. Great to be here.
Great. Good morning.
Good morning. That's right. It's a little earlier for you all. You're coming in from Oregon, specifically from Portland, outside Portland. Is that right?
Yep.
Excellent. Well, it is such a privilege to be speaking with you. We've been trying to put out more interviews on FTF's YouTube page just to try to spread the word about some of the great work that other people are doing. And also it's part of our mission to disseminate practical functional assessment and skill-based treatment. And one of the main reasons I wanted to speak with you both is that we've partnered with you for multiple years, but your team has been really scaling up practical functional assessments and skill-based treatment as tier 3 interventions to address severe behavior in schools. And so I'm so excited to let you kind of share with us all the work that you have been doing, that your teams have been doing, that you have supported. So why don't we start there? If we could, I'd love it if you could briefly tell us a little bit about yourselves, your roles, and the scope of school-based services that you oversee.
Well, I'm with Columbia Regional Inclusive Services, as is Hillary, and we are part of a statewide network in Oregon that serves children. They're designated as having low incidence disabilities, children with complex support needs who require highly specialized staff in order to access their instruction. And we serve 4 counties and 23 school districts, 3 early childhood programs. We encompass about 35 to 40% of the state's children on the autism spectrum, and then other disability categories like blind and low vision, deaf, hard of hearing, deaf blindness, traumatic brain injury, and complex orthopedic or physical disabilities. And we partner very closely with districts. They kind of provide the day-to-day instructional services, and then we come alongside as partners. We're especially the autism team, we're very focused on capacity building, training, coaching, helping provide folks with the tools and resources they need to provide high quality services to children on the autism spectrum. So that's a little bit about our agency.
Thank you. Hillary, how about a little bit about your role?
Yes, so I'm Hillary Flood, and I'm an autism consultant for Columbia Regional. I'm also a special education teacher, so that's my background. And then later on, I became a behavior analyst. So I serve on the autism team and got to help grow this pilot of PFA SBT in our region, and then now kind of helping people do it across the state.
Terrific. So it sounds like you support not only students in school, but multiple school districts.
Yes.
Do I have that right? Okay. And all across the state of Oregon.
Well, we've got a 4-county region, and then there's other regional inclusive services to ensure that there's equitable access to services across the state, especially for children who have more highly specialized support needs, right?
Sure.
So that's kind of our focus.
Understood. I know that states vary, that different states in the United States have different kind of programs or arrangements for how to do this. Some states call it collaborative services or cooperative services.
Yep, it's very similar.
It's an inclusive services. That's what we call it.
Right. Well, and yes, in Oregon, it's all about trying to make children as successful as they can be in the least restrictive setting possible.
Fantastic. A mission that's probably shared by a lot of folks. A small amount of backstory for those who are listening. I only joined FTF Behavioral Consulting a little over a year ago, but a few years before that, Hillary, I saw a presentation that had been posted online that you shared that was describing, I think, 2 or 3 years maybe of progress in trying to scale up practical functional assessments and skill-based treatments. And that presentation kind of knocked my socks off. And so I've kind of been a fan for a little while. But this past November, we came out to Portland and we partnered together, your group and ours, to do a little on the road event where we talked a little bit about practical functional assessment and skill-based treatment in schools. And Hillary, you gave a presentation that was like an update about just what your group had been up to in terms of scaling up tier 3 interventions. And it was so tremendous. The room was just like sitting on the edge of their seat. And we thought, well, more people probably need to hear about this. So thanks so much for sitting here and chatting with me. I'd love to kind of wind the clocks way back if we can. So this is, if you're listening and if you've heard about practical functional assessment and skill-based treatment, if you are looking for support with tier 3 interventions in schools, this, I think, interview is for you. So let's start at the very beginning. Hillary and or Brad, could you walk us through sort of some of the initial decisions that were made or what motivated you to consider practical functional assessment and skill-based treatment as a tier 3 intervention for your students?
I think Brad and I came at it from twofold. I was lucky enough when I was serving within one of our school districts locally to take the online PFA SBT training by FTF, and it blew my socks off. And I started telling everybody, I was like, we have to do it, we have to do it. But I didn't have an avenue or a lane to do that. Then in stepped Columbia Regional and Brad and our bigger bosses that gave us kind of the leeway to take this on. Brad, do you want to share how, as an admin, you got the ball rolling for this?
Yeah, I mean, because we support so many school districts, we convene a monthly autism professional learning community, and that includes behavior analysts, autism specialists, administrators, and others who all have kind of a district-wide interest in supporting autistic children in their respective districts. And I think this was 2021. The conversations then were focused, we were at that time focused on children and supporting children with really significant self-interest behavior. And we were having conversations about how to build capacity in the district. And really it was our behavior analysts, including Hillary and others in our districts, a couple of them said, we're learning about this clinician and scholar named Dr. Greg Hanley, and he's doing they were excited by the innovative work that was represented by PFA SBT. And, the more I learned about it and looked at the research, and then we had a number of staff go through, I think it was a 10 to 11 hour training back then. And the response was universal. Like, I don't want to be hyperbolic, but every time somebody completed that series, they would talk about a paradigm shift, that it was, rather mind blowing to have this different way of thinking about children. And I want to be careful and judicious in my comments here about what I'm about to say, but business as usual wasn't getting the results that folks want to see. I recognize that a traditional FBA and behavior support plan, when done thoroughly and with fidelity and effectively, can be very impactful in a child's life. And I'm not running down that process. But what we were observing is that business as usual just wasn't yielding the results that the traditional FBAs were taking a long time. And they were too often, and I think this is really still the case, too often procedural and perfunctory, and that's no one's fault. I mean, people are stretched very, very thin, but often it was a procedural hoop, right? This child is having really significant behavioral issues. By law, we have to do an FBA, and then too often those were not treated as you develop a hypothesis, you test it through your interventions, and so we got very excited that PFA SBT, it offered a different frame for thinking about assessment and moving very, very quickly into intervention support and seeing very early wins. And so that was very exciting. And so I went into my boss's office and asked for some resources, and we met with FTF, and they walked us through a really rigorous training and coaching model, right? The setting folks up into cohorts and dyads, within the ear coaching, and and we developed an agreement with FTF, and who was just really extraordinary to work with. They've been wonderful partners this entire time. And I think Hillary can do a better job describing our first cohort, or our first pilot project, right? And we made a decision. This isn't because we thought that any other group was less capable. We just had a significant number of school-based behavior analysts that were part of our professional learning community. And the other thing we've been seeing in recent years that was a new phenomenon in Oregon was the rise in the number of school-based behavior analysts. Like if you went back 10 years prior, you went back to like 2010, there was like one or two, and now we have like 18 or something. So we really thought it made a lot of sense to leverage the expertise of these school-based behavior analysts, but bring in partners. I mean, one of the things that Dr. Hanley emphasized for us very early on that I found very appealing was that these aren't tools that we're going to limit or kind of sequester with behavior analysts, that you have to have, the magic decoder ring, right, to be able to access and utilize these interventions. He was extremely inclusive, kind of demonstrated a disciplinary humility and openness and respect for occupational therapy, speech language pathology, special education teachers, paraeducators, school psychologists. I found that very, very appealing. And so, we embarked upon that first year pilot project. And I don't know, I feel like I want to pause there. Do you want me to pause there? Because the results we saw were really, really exciting, from the number of districts that participated, and just seeing kids, a group of children who struggle daily with, complex behavioral needs, to see in a relatively short amount of time, teams establish rapport, establish trust, kind of reboot their relationship with a child, achieve zero or near zero levels of that severe behavior, and have kids communicating what they need. And then adults honoring that. That's, to me, like a really critical aspect of PFA SBT, is training kids not just to communicate, but training the adults to understand how to actually be tuned into kids and back off. And then what happens to children emotionally and psychologically when we start honoring that? Like, that sounds like a small thing, but it's actually a big thing, because people think that they're, bringing down the heat in the schools, but they're often not. And it's not ill-intended, but when you actually honor what kids are trying to say, then you develop trust, you build rapport, and then when you need to push them a little bit, they're with you. They're ready to go there. They're willing to take a few risks and try something harder. But not if you're in this cycle of power struggles and meltdowns. And so, anyway, I could go on and on, but I'll stop.
Well, I really appreciate hearing all of that. You covered so much ground there. One of the things that I really extract from that conversation is when you talk about business as usual, you are talking about more of the traditional model of conducting an FBA, which sometimes takes a long time, and then developing a behavior intervention plan based upon that. And if I'm understanding correctly, Brad, it sounds like you're saying that model, as it was prescribed or as it was being implemented in schools, was not necessarily resulting in those improved relationships or the ability to kind of push students a little bit harder than yesterday?
Not for our kids with the most complex, significant, kind of patterned behavioral needs. Am I saying, is that a wholesale dismissal of that technology? Absolutely not. I think sometimes it's not a matter of the tools, it's a matter of the fidelity with which school-based staff can implement them. The tools that we've had for decades now just aren't yielding the results, and that's not good for kids. It's really bad for teachers and staff. We don't want people burning out. Attrition's a problem. It's so we needed additional tools and resources to actually teach skills. I think that probably the biggest, if I had to like isolate one major variable that I think is often missing, is that not just skill development, but providing school-based professionals with a roadmap for understanding what skills to focus on, in what scope and sequence, in using which techniques. And that is, as far as I know, Hillary and I remember when we were first exploring this and learning about it and excited about it, we assumed that there were other models that provided a similar level of clarity, and we just didn't know what they were, because, and then the more time we sat with it and learned, we were like, oh my goodness, there isn't really a roadmap for professionals to understand the skills to teach. And what also impressed us about the research was the way in which Dr. Hanley's, and not just Dr. Hanley, many other scholars have researched the elements of PFA SBT, but the way in which those skills have been carefully researched. I mean, the vast literature on functional communication training that serves as a foundation for PFA SBT, and then just the very carefully designed, high quality research that was done for kind of each component and kind of each aspect and question related to the implementation of PFA SBT, and research that's going on right now, right? The other thing I think is remarkable about the model is how it is constantly evolving, and the way practitioners and the group at FTF is surveilling the landscape, constantly collecting data, and being ready to refine and improve the model. I mean, it's remarkable in a way, because how you don't see that a lot with intervention approaches, that they're so I don't know, there's a kind of a dynamism to keeping them current relative to the new evidence that's emerging. And so we've seen it be very responsive to just new learning, new research, new findings. So
Well, many of those changes are possible because of groups like yours that are doing it a lot, that are getting experience implementing it with new students with different profiles, students in different contexts. And so it's a real, I think, symbiotic relationship to be able to have long-term partnerships with teams. And that's why we're here today. Brad, you said, again, so much that was really valuable, I think, to folks that are interested in practical functional assessment and skill-based treatment. And I really appreciated how you were specific in saying we're really talking about the students with the most complex needs or the most kind of like significant behavioral challenges. And so given all that, Hillary, I'd love to pivot to you. And I want to kind of know, it's so cool that you had access to this training experience, and it was personally, it turned a light bulb on for you. Given that, and then given the scope of what Columbia Regional kind of, how many students you support, how did you know where to start? Like, how did you select the first few students? How did you know to start with a small amount of students? Like what were those early days like from your perspective?
So FTF is real nice to work with, because you make a phone call or you send an email and somebody responds and really holds your hand through the process. But we knew based on this, like the regional autism PLC professional learning community, that people came, they were interested. So the interest was there. People were seeking a better way to do their jobs and help students. And so then it was kind of like, well, if we're going to do this, who's in? And if you're kind of a district level person, you have to have a school-based implementer has to be your co-implementer. So there was kind of some standards that if you're just somebody that is there one day a week, that's not going to be good enough. You're going to have to be a lead implementer. You're going to have to implement at least 3 days a week, and your co-implementer has to be a school specific staff member. And so we had SLPs, we had CODAs, so certified occupational assistants. We've had occupational therapists. Now we've had paraprofessionals. We've had, of course, special education teachers. In one district, an admin is they're like, if no one's there, I want to be able to co-implement. And so it's really cool that people are doing this shift. And so that was kind of the role. We had 14 folks in the original pilot. So it was 14 students, which meant 28 staff. So for every student, you need at least 2 implementers. And I will tell you, in my case, the reason why is because people get sick, people go out on leave, and you want the kid to get the level of intervention and the dosage. So that was the requirement. We did not put a requirement on what student that they picked, although we are on the autism team, and I work with a great, like, all, our colleagues are all implementing this now. There wasn't a rule about that, because in my mind, I'm a special education teacher first, that I wanted to see if this intervention could work with a wide population. Of course, a lot of people did have autistic learners, but that was not the full case. We also, I wanted to make sure that we had kids all the way in our highest grade levels to our youngest. So in some ways, I was hand picking certain teams. Anybody that was interested, we made sure that they had access to the online training. But when it came to who's going to implement the pilot, we definitely wanted pre-K all the way to high school. We wanted a vocal verbal range. So kids that were maybe not having traditional communication, maybe they were only using gestures or body language to communicate their needs. And let's be honest, a lot of maladaptive behavior across the board, to kids that were highly vocally, verbally fluent. And because I knew that if we were ever going to really see if this intervention worked, we had to make sure we did it with a wide range of kids. Because if it only worked with a very subset of kids, we just don't have those resources in school. So if to ever pilot again, try cast the widest net you can, if you can do it on the scale we did.
Awesome. That's so helpful to know, Hillary. So you take a training, you say we need to try this, and you're using the language of pilot because it really felt like it was. There was an element of proof of concept. Can we
Absolutely.
make practical functional assessment and skill-based treatment work as a tier 3 intervention within our system? I'm personally curious. How did you land on 14? Was that something that was just
It was
specific?
No, it was how many people were interested. They could find a target student, because you have to have permission to videotape. So like lots more people than that were interested, but they couldn't get the right permission. They couldn't get the location. Maybe their admin weren't ready. So of some of the districts that were like, man, I'm not interested in the pilot back then, are doing it now. They just,
Very
and
cool.
there are resources that they couldn't put towards this. So, but people are very
Sure.
excited. And then, yeah.
I've been using this language a lot more lately. It does, practical functional assessment and skill-based treatment represents a few departures from the typical way of doing FBA and BIP, as we've kind of already addressed. And I think it does benefit folks to approach their first trial, their pilot, as an apprenticeship. I'm learning how this works, not just for this particular student, not just how the procedures can be individualized, but how it works within our school system. So Hillary, I so appreciate what you're saying about casting a wide net. When we partner with schools or school districts, we very often will start with just a cohort of 3 students. And we do try to have it be a diverse student profile within that cohort of 3, just so that we can see that it works and figure out the tweaks. But
Absolutely.
there are so many individuals that I interact with, either at trainings, when they reach out to FTF, or just out at conferences, who are kind of trying to understand what it becomes. How do you start with 3? I have a school district that supports over 100,000 students. So I guess where I'd like to go next is that initial pilot, it sounds like was 2021, 2022. Is that right? That calendar year?
Yep.
Well, Hillary, it looks like you want to say something.
Yeah, so that, because it were regional services, there wasn't 14 students from one district. It was like people from multiple districts going, we want in. So the 14 students were across multiple districts, which is quite a headache to manage that many districts. But again, Brad and Columbia Regional and our bigger bosses are really receptive to whoever wants to do better within their career in training. Regional will do everything they can to help secure access to it. And so, so it wasn't from one district. There's no way anybody would give us 28 staff from one district.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. So multiple districts participate. So what I take away from that is that it's a real privilege to have this kind of central governing or central support system that can feed out to the multiple districts. Now, were these individuals that were in A district, B district, and C district, were they kind of learning how to do the process in cohorts together?
Yes, they were. So they were doing like the 3-kid model cohort too.
Sure.
So, but some districts didn't have enough. They're very small, so they teamed with another district. So that district had 1 student, this district had 2, and they were put together. So you still had the learning experience of having multiple students go through it, because as anybody knows, if you've done it with one student, you've done it with one student. But if you can see it be done with different types of learners in different environmental contingencies, how do you do this at recess if a kid won't come inside? Well, it's great to have a district or a kid that is that kind of learner. So that would you have to, if I could say anything to people, is get multiple learners in whatever pilot or apprenticeship you're doing, because you learn so much. You'll learn a lot with your own student, but you'll also learn so much if you can see this going on in real time with other people too.
100%. I mean, I couldn't agree more. I've been implementing, researching, and supporting this process for, I think, officially almost 10 years now. And every new client presents with some new, kind of idiosyncrasies, sometimes some new challenges, and learning in a community is always better. I wonder if y'all could catch us up to the present. So we had this initial pilot that was 2021, 2022. And again, one of the main reasons that I want everyone to hear about your work is that y'all stuck with this and that you've continued to build upon the initial success of the kind of the first 14 students you supported. So however you want to describe it, could you tell us what's the current state of practical functional assessment and skill-based treatment as a tier 3 intervention across the schools that you support? Please just catch us up.
But before we pivot to that, I wanted to, I don't know if you were going to ask about this later, D2, but one of the things we learned right out the gate that FTF was good about coaching us on, and that we've continued to learn over the last 5 years, is we have to be very clear-eyed and upfront about this. Is not like when you get trained in PFA, SBT, a lot of school-based professionals are used to going to the one and done, a half-day workshop, a full-day workshop, and then on they go. Maybe they implement, maybe they don't. For some things, like we do a day-long video modeling workshop, which is an evidence-based practice for autism. It actually fits beautifully within that one-day format. We learn about the research, the theory, the implementation in the morning, and then in the afternoon they get to actually practice doing video modeling. They can leave and go implement it. PFA SBT requires it requires a robust training coaching model, and we have to be upfront with folks. We were upfront with them about the price of admission. It's not insubstantial. I'm not trying to scare people off, but we have to, because people, they learn about it. They'll go to a half day and I want that. It's like, okay, you want it, but you have to understand what it takes to learn how to implement it with fidelity. It's a meaningful, robust training coaching framework. Some things will be asked of those trainees to demonstrate competency, get feedback. But then on the flip side of it is, once you're trained for the rest of your career. And it can, I don't mean to be hyperbolic, but it can the feedback we get from trainees is that it fundamentally shifts their practice for children. We've had folks who have went through the pilot or been trained, who maybe they're in their current role, they're not directly implementing PFA SBT, but they are helping kids with complex behaviors, and they're utilizing everything they've learned, and they're using it in ways that are very impactful for children. Situations where maybe a student, the district was in the process of gathering data to substantiate and place that child in an out-of-district placement for $100,000 a year or whatever. And some of the tools that people are using are interrupting that process to stabilize this child's experience in their neighborhood school, so they never even have to go to that more restrictive placement. That's language that special education directors resonates with them. It resonates with superintendents and principals, because that's what we want. We want kids to be successful in their neighborhood schools. And so I just want to be very candid about that there's a price of admission in terms of people having to have some skin in the game and some time, and we're upfront about that. The other thing I'll say is that Hillary played a really vital role. I tell her very honestly that if it wasn't for her, I think our attrition rate would have been quite a bit higher, because in that first year, when these teams signed up for this, and then they saw some of the data collection procedures, some of the language is back then. It's less now. It's more accessible now in 2026, but in 2021 it was more kind of behavior analytic. Not everybody's a behavior analyst. right? And so some of that language could be a bit daunting. Some of the data collection could be a bit daunting. And it was Hillary going, as people would get shaky, and she'd say, "You can do this.
Mm-hmm.
Let me reassure you." And that kept people in the fold. And that ended up being a really critical ingredient. And I guess I bring that up because for agencies and districts to stand this up for the first time, it is good to have a champion.
Mm-hmm.
Someone who
Yeah.
understands the model and sees its effectiveness and is passionate about it. I mean, it's not always easy to kind of just pluck that out of thin air, but it really captured. I don't mean to be talking about you in third person, Hillary, but you could just tell that as a school-based professional who had run a special education classroom, had been in a behavior support role for years, that it had captured your imagination in terms of the potential to really move the needle for kids in ways that our other tools weren't having that effect. And so I could just tell very early on, and that was why it just made so much sense to ask Hillary to take on a lead role. And she just jumped in with both feet. And I know, I just feel really confident that if she hadn't stepped up in that way, I just don't know how successful. I think we would have had some successes, for sure. But I don't know if it would have been as extensive. I think, so, it's not, I do want credit. I do want Hillary to get credit, and I want her to feel appreciated, but it's also the message to folks out there who are implementing. It's good to have somebody who, is invested in the model and can champion it a bit and can come alongside people when they're getting a little shaky or have some questions. So I just wanted to put
Well,
those two things
and
out.
Well, and to add to that, when we were first thinking about this, I mean, Brad likes research. I mean, I like research. Brad loves research. So he's digging into everything. And a big question was, what other districts are doing this? What school? Like, you have to connect us with somebody. And you guys did. FTF was like, we got some schools that are doing that. And we made those phone calls. We had those online meetings to say, how are you doing it? What went really well? What went really wrong? In that type of way. And how could we adapt it or see the writing on the wall, so we know how to ebb and flow with those situations when they came. And because of those connections and so many districts now doing it, I mean, we can do this really well in schools. And so that was the shift of like, this might happen somewhere else or in very specialized schools or in hospital settings, but how do we do it here? And so having those early relationships with a couple of districts that were doing it was like, they can do it, we can do it. So it's almost like if you see something, then you can repeat it. And that's how I felt. Yeah. Do you want me to talk about how we kind of grew? I think or do you
I
have
would
another
love
question?
that. I also just love giving people their flowers. So thank you, Brad, for doing it, and thank you, Hillary. I'll give you some more flowers. You're very good at receiving flowers. I feel like if I was sitting here, I'd just be blushing, and I might have turned my camera off. But it's very well deserved, Hillary. Your reputation precedes you. We talk about you as a kind of a pioneer and a champion and a leader of bringing this to school systems all the time at FTF. So that's wonderful. But Hillary, please, in the spirit of that, tell us how this process has continued and scaled up.
Yeah. So, and I will have to, work on the best autism team in the world. So there was folks that were in the original pilot with us, with me alongside having their own students in other districts. Cause on the autism team, we each support different districts. And so people got to do this well. And so all of us were really excited about the results we were seeing. And then the following year, there's the train the trainer model. And we
Mm-hmm.
got such great results. And our mission always with FTF and that partnership was, we need to be able to do this within our own house, within our own state, within our own region, because our little districts cannot afford and we just have to be honest where educational budgets are right now. And FTF's mission was that they were like, we want you guys to have the tools to be able to grow this within your region, and then however it goes across the state. So we did the trainer model. So three 3 of us from the original cohort became train the trainers, and then our job was to do what FTF did to us and
Mhm.
have multiple like we have multiple districts with multiple students, multiple people, and we would do all of the coaching, but FTF is coaching us, and it was a high level of fidelity of, are you being a good coach? Are you getting are you shaping the adult's behavior to make an impact for the kid? Because it always comes back, it's what we do, it's not the student. Like, if the student doesn't have whatever skills, that's on us as educators. But if you as an educator don't know your own holes in what you're doing, you're never going to see it for your students. You won't know. And that's something this process keeps bringing back. When you talk about the apprenticeship, it is an apprenticeship. It's like student teaching on, like, you know, to the max, because so many people don't get this guided experience. And that was one of the biggest things, the guided experience of, I'm not doing this alone. If there's a problem, somebody I can call, they'll help me through it. So we did the train the trainer model, got, again, really good results. Some of the best results is not just from the students, it's from the staff, that they go, I can work with any kid now. I know what to do. To watch a paraprofessional say, oh, I got this, I know exactly what he needs, empowers a classroom. And if you can shift the mindset of a classroom, you've changed the outcome for every student in that classroom for the rest of their life. Because then we go, they do have skills, they can learn. I know how to teach these kids. So that was really cool to, like, firsthand get to do it as a train. Oh,
Question,
please do.
Hillary.
Yeah.
This is you're crushing it. I want to let you cook. Were you one of the trainers in that initial train
Yes.
the trainer?
Yep.
Okay. And
Yep.
so, as a trainer, could you speak briefly about, like, how did that fit within the remit of your job? Like, did you have to make a lot of adjustments to your day to day to accommodate that experience?
We're lucky that we have a very understanding boss in Columbia Regional. Like all regional services in our state, want to be as responsive as we can to our districts. And we
Hmm.
saw Brad and our bigger boss, Lisa, saw
Hmm.
something that districts were excited about. And they're like, okay, there is this train the trainer. How are we going to do it? And so a part of my job then was, yes, I'm going to be a train the trainer of this model, and FTF
Cool.
kind of got to become my baby. I still do other things for districts, but
Hmm.
this is a very important part of my job. And I do think if you were to, like, scale it bigger, it does have to be a part of somebody's job within a
Mm.
district. If they don't,
Okay.
if you're a behavior coach in a district, I would love admin to recognize that, to do this well, to give really good feedback. It's not just dropping by a classroom and saying,
Mm-hmm.
try this. It is it's in-depth coaching, and everybody loves it. What they don't like is being told what to do, 3 times a year and then left to flounder. They want really good coaching. And that's what this taught me. I got really good coaching, and then they taught me how to be an even better coach. And I was coaching already, but this made me better. So
Hmm.
that was exciting from, as a person that loves special education and loves teaching teachers how to be really good at their jobs. FTF definitely made me better because of it.
Oh
So
my gosh. That is
yeah,
so
it's
cool.
cool.
So it took, year one pilot, make sure that the pig can fly, if you
Yep,
will.
did it
That
with
is.
my own student, had my own
Uh-huh.
student, saw the growth in this student, saw the growth in the family, saw a happier kid, saw a mom that found hope for the first time. She loves her kid. She's shifting the world for her kid already, but there was no path through the forest. And to do this so do it personally. You have to do it personally because you can't coach something that you don't know how to shift and move. And then the second school year that we did the pilot, it was the train the trainer. So not only was I still had different, students I was working with, now I was coaching a group of professionals with new students that hadn't been in the pilot. Um,
Yeah, awesome. It makes so much sense. A small note, that family, the child that you're talking about, have you shared a case presentation featuring that child before?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, awesome. I
Yeah.
think it's on the internet. We'll link it for folks that are interested, because that was really compelling. And I think that at some point, even the mom kind of commented on how it impacted their life.
Yeah.
It's
And
really
I will,
beautiful.
and for transparency, that student has had blips in their education. It's not like you learn these skills, and kids, we have, life is tough. There's things that get in kids' way. So sometimes do they have little blips on the way? Absolutely. But the cool thing is the staff that's working with these kids now have been trained in PFA SBT. They know how to turn down the heat for this student, and they know the student has the skills. They're in their repertoire, they're back there. So when we can bring the heat down and they all can respect where a learner is, they know how to change a situation now. And that's really cool, is that all of this never goes away. Once you learn it, you do have these skills. And now we have a community of learners that know really how to work with this population. And that's something exciting for, I think, Brad and I and our team at Columbia Regional, on the autism team, because now we know if our kid has to move districts, because, we have a large population that, goes from district to district. Now somebody in that receiving district will be trained in PFA SBT, so it doesn't fall apart. And if they have to move again, somebody's there to, like, hey, this kid's coming, you know what to do, and this is where we are. So that's also really exciting.
That's really cool. I think that's one of those like kind of indirect downstream effects of learning about this. And specifically, Hillary, one of the things that I think you're alluding to, correct me if I'm wrong, is that we learn how to be a little bit more responsive to behavior when it occurs, problem behavior, severe behavior, in a way that helps us turn things off before they escalate to something more significant.
Absolutely.
And like, I'm a big fan of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And so I think a lot about, parallel universes and multiverses. And I think often that when a team is empowered to respond to precursor behaviors and prevent escalation, I think about all of the different universes of severe behavior that like could have occurred, you know what I mean? That may have been prevented. And you're talking about this on a somewhat global scale. You're saying like there's now across multiple schools. Just think of the amount and the intensity and the injury associated with severe behavior that your teams may have prevented, quite literally, by shifting the way that they react to it in the moment, and by being responsive to severe behavior when it occurs.
Yeah, it's too bad you can't measure the bad things that never happen, right? It's like, if only we could. I wonder if this is I don't know if this is a good point to mention this at all, but some of the incredible learning that's been going on over the last 5 years around PFA SBT, and some of it's learning is hard. Learning is hard sometimes, and I think one of the things that we've learned is that PFA SBT is not a panacea. It's in the sense that if you implement PFA SBT and you're able in a quiet, low distraction, enriched environment with somebody who's trained, and you help that child develop skills, they have to return to an environment that supports them. And so what we've learned, and Hillary's been so skillful about emphasizing this and kind of adapting her training materials, is, and I'm just going to speak candidly or speak honestly, if a classroom is super dysfunctional and some fundamental tools aren't in place, like tier one, like around structure and routines and predictability and schedule, some of the kind of evidence-based practices that we know work for autistic learners, if those things are not in place and the environment is, as a result, pretty chaotic, we can make wonderful progress with a child, but then to send them back in that environment can kind of risk unwinding a lot of that good work. And so sometimes people want to utilize a tier 3 intervention to address a tier 1 problem. And we've had to be emphatic about saying, you have to kind of have your ducks in a row at that fundamental level. And then when you're, just because of that phenomenon, I think that's just a really hard thing to do to a child. And so we've just, I don't know if you want to elaborate on that, Hillary, but I just think there's no more complex ecology than schools. And it's a complex environment to do and stand up anything. And it's a complex environment for children. And so we just have to, PFA SBT works best and most kind of elegantly when utilized alongside other research-based, tried and true methods for supporting certainly our focus is on autistic learners, but we all know that like the providing a high level of structure and predictability and routines benefits all children, all learners. And so we sometimes have to go back to that conversation and say, we need to, this is more of a kind of a foundational issue. And and once we kind of get things in order there, that might be a better, then we might be in a better place to look at PFA, SBT. And I mean, I don't know, Hillary, explain it better than I'm doing.
So I think one thing as every year has gone on that we've been trying to roll this out, there more districts go, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? So it's made us have to be really responsive to what we're hearing. Our other, other folks on the autism team, they're implementing this in their district, and they come and go, well, they're asking this. So one way to be responsive is like, where does this sit within our MTSS framework? Where does components of
Mm.
PFA, SBT live in tier 1? And we had to make those visuals. And where do they live in tier 2? This SBT PFA is a tier 3 intervention.
Hmm.
But teaching a kid to relinquish their most preferred item and transition and understand that sometimes you have to wait, and using your words to get what you want, those are things that we should be teaching in every tier.
Yeah.
Um, and they don't know. And again, it shows the holes that maybe they actually don't know how to do it for the learners that they have in those classrooms. So it opened up some like ways to explain, like, this is where these things live in all those tiers. This is where the tier 3 intervention itself lives. And then, making flow charts. If you have a learner that looks like this,
Yeah.
then move this direction. If you have a learner that looks like this, move direction, and gave those tools back to every time the district goes, but what if? It was, how do we create the training and teaching materials that are needed to go, so a team knows, oh, I do need to strengthen our tier 1, tier 2 classrooms, because let's be honest, most districts don't think they have the resources for a tier 3 intervention like this.
Sure.
They're
Yeah.
already doing it, and Brad will speak all the time on, you know what, if you're not doing this, you're chasing a kid. He says it better than
Mm.
I, but you're doing something. So if we
Hmm.
put the weight behind teaching it, so I think whoever is going to do this, and they're doing it in their district, be super responsive to your district. If there is a problem, figure out how you explain it in a school setting.
Hmm.
And that's just everything we continue to try to do within our own regional trainings. And we, kind of also shifted the priority of what people need to know for their roles and responsibilities. For
Sure. Okay.
example, para educators, I want them much more well versed on the implementation, the SBT side of it, the skill
Hmm.
building, because they live there a lot. Whereas maybe not as high, I want them to know the analysis. They might be in the room that the analysis happens, but they're probably not leading and designing the analysis. And
Hmm.
so making sure we're targeting the resources where they need to go. Yeah, it's such a dynamic process. And it has allowed at least me to kind of fill that need that I need in jobs of like taking things and moving and shifting and changing with them. So it's been
Yeah.
really lucky in that sense.
It takes a village, and everyone in a village has their own role. And Hillary,
Absolutely.
it's actually particularly funny that you say that. We just released a course that's skill-based treatment for behavior technicians.
I
And
know.
we skipped the part about functional analysis because we basically say we want you to know, if you were to walk into a classroom tomorrow and you had to implement a skill-based treatment session, this is where you should start. So it's highly aligned with kind of the understanding people's roles and how they can contribute to these outcomes. Speaking of outcomes, I do want to get back to, so Hillary, you mentioned year 1 and year 2, but in 2025, 2026, what is this program? Has it been able to stick around? Have you been able
Yeah.
to expand upon it? Awesome. Please
Yes. So
let us
in
know.
general, so from the beginning to now, over 350 people have been trained. In year 2, maybe going into year 3, Dr. Hanley actually came out, did the 3-day. So that got a lot of people trained. But then, who's implementing the pilots? And so, yes, there's a lot of people that do the either online training or the like come in person and do the day-long training with us. And that's just, we always talk about it, that's the foundation, and that's where the paradigm shift happens of like, we can teach, you can learn, these kids can do amazing things. And then of all those people, we have 19 districts that have implemented, to where whether FTF coached it in the 2 first years or in the train the trainer model, the second one, and then now us doing it in our own region is like, yes, yeah, we're doing it. We're getting districts going, and then for this past year, we know at least 90 students have received the intervention to like a level of fidelity, which is really cool
Hang on.
because
90
yeah,
just in this past year, or cumulatively 90 students?
yes, yeah, not in this
Okay.
past year, but that's one.
Cumulatively. Mhm.
Yes. But that's one thing to say. We have districts that have been in it and now they're running, and I don't collect those numbers. So these are the
Uh-huh.
kids that I know I can collect numbers on. But we have lots of districts that were like, we got it, we're trained, we'll call you if we have any questions. And so they're running, and they have 6 kids that I don't
Mhm.
know about because they're not. So it's exciting to be at 90 kids. Because it's just this like small fire burning. It keeps building. And one other thing that we're really proud of is districts are saying kids are staying in their home districts, in their
Oh
home schools.
gosh. Tell us about
Brad,
it. Right.
yeah, Brad mentioned, it's at least $100,000 to kids to go to these more restrictive settings.
Mhm.
And are they needed sometimes? Of course, I'm not going to say that. But if we could have the tools to keep kids in their home district with their siblings, to be on the bus in their neighborhood, they're supposed to be in schools, you guys. This is their community. This is the community they're going to live in, and not a 45-minute bus ride to a community that they don't know and their parents aren't tied to. So let's keep kids in our homeschool. And so across the cumulative years that we've been doing this, we've kept 24 students within their homeschool setting. And that's a lot of money if you think $100,000 per kid could be going to.
24 kids who would have otherwise, basically, like, multiple people agreed they would have otherwise been sent out of
Yeah.
district, or was there even a conversation about them
They were
being?
on the docket. Some of these kids were on the wait list for a placement to open when we started this process. And because of this process, they're like, scratch that kid's name. They don't need that
Oh
anymore.
my
Um,
gosh.
and I would say in our area, because we've done such good training, those more like, out of district placements, they're also trained in PFA SBT now. And so they also have the tools to move kids quicker back to their home district. So it's
The
all of
ecosystem.
it is.
Mhm.
It's a really cool one.
That is tremendous. Congratulations. Honestly, I know that the work continues, that the grind never stops, that the challenges will always be there, but this feels like such a privileged moment. I feel so lucky to be able to speak with you both and just reflect on that. That is awesome.
It
That
has
is
been.
so cool.
Hillary, I don't think you talked about like amazing work that's happening in Southern Oregon out of Medford and Northwest Regional ESD out of Hillsboro. I mean, PFA SBT is now a topic of conversation at the statewide level. There's a fluency around it. If people aren't implementing it, they're certainly hearing the conversations that are occurring. And so Hillary's talking about children in our 4 county region, but there are kids. I mean, I know that the team down in Southern Oregon, Nikki Donnelly and her team, they've presented at conferences on their effective work with PFA SBT in their STEPS program, which I'm trying to recall is their at ESD, or Education Service District. It's like a co-op. It's an out of district placement where districts send children, where they've stood at PFA SBT up and had, from all accounts, had a lot of success. I mean, Hillary, you went down there and provided multiple days of training, and so there's been the kind of like this work to help kind of seed PFA SBT. Hillary is just one human being, of course, so Hillary, the impact's actually wider. It's in different pockets of the state, and we have a statewide autism professional leadership team. And what was the name of the woman from Nebraska? It wasn't Nikki. Was it Nikki? Is it Allie? Allie. Yeah, Allie, and she spoke to our, just because their team brought her in, right? Because Hillary's just one human being, is somebody who could provide some coaching and support for their teams around PFA SBT. So it's an ongoing conversation. It's like Hillary alluded to this earlier. one of the biggest barriers is, and I don't want to sound dismissive of this because I'm not at all, but people will say, we don't have the resources, we don't have the staff. And what we always, what we try to reiterate is, look, for a kid that you already have a paraeducator mapped onto that kid, spending time in this little side sensory room all day. And you, I love the phrase, I love your phrase, D, too, living that eggshell life, right? Like people who are just trying to avoid triggering a big episode. And that's their, as a school-based professional, that's what they're doing. And so our response is, well, you're already mapping those resources onto these children. Why not, when they're, outside of the classroom, why not do some skill building with them? Why not help them develop the skills that they need to be successful student, to be a successful human being in the world? And this is nothing to do with compliance or adult agendas. Nothing centers a child's dignity and autonomy and agency more than helping them communicate effectively and be understood and develop skills. Like, this is a big conversation we're having right now. And I think that skill development it's just at the heart of what we're responsible for helping kids develop the skills that they need to be in the world successfully. And it is about their agency and about their independence and autonomy. It's not, a point we're often making around the severe behavior is, it's really hard on school staff to, have kids who are aggressive and eloping and dealing with all that. But good Lord, it's really hard on the kids to be every day coming to school with elevated cortisol levels, being anxious, going into fight or flight. These kids are miserable, right? And so if we have the tools to teach them to communicate, and we can help adults understand how to actually honor that communication and back off, and that when you do that, that puts kids in a better place to actually be responsive to your instructions, so you can kind of gradually up the ante. It's really effective. I mean, I don't know what else to say. It's really, really effective. But people, there is that pushback around time and resources, and it's like, gosh, you're already expending the resources. Sometimes people don't always, it's, there are additional resources to expend in learning the model. That's true. That takes some energy and some time and some administrative commitment, right? You do need, for PFA, SBT to be successful, you need stakeholder buy-in, including administrative support. When we got started in 2021, it was kind of more grassroots. It was clinicians and educators who learned about it. And then it was like the process of kind of persuading administration. And so, it wasn't a top down. It was very much kind of a grassroots bottom up movement. But we've learned that you have to, and Dr. Hanley said it very early, but we had to do some of our own learning around how you've got to bring in those related service professionals. You need to explain to them what you're doing and why, because otherwise the perception is, you've probably heard this stuff. People are like, well, of course he's doing better. You're just letting him do whatever he wants. It's like, no, we're very strategically backing off and focusing on rapport. And we're focusing on helping this child understand we're going to stop pushing you to a point where you have to react explosively in order to get your needs met. We're going to interrupt that. And we're going to help you gradually at a pace that you can handle, develop skills. It's a huge deal for kids.
I think that is a terrific perspective shift. Talking about kind of the cost benefit of the resources. I know that there's a lot of skepticism. Part of the reason I wanted to have y'all here is that I think another source of skepticism is sort of looking down the barrel of learning how to do this process as a new professional, or of thinking about your gigantic school district and thinking about where to start. And so, I kind of want to wrap up here, but or begin the wrap up by just, again, thanking you, because I think you've given people some vision. It starts small. Sometimes it starts with 1, 2, or 3 students. In your case, it started with 14 students, but fast forward just a few years later, and you have you have supported 90 students through this process, many of whom are staying in district as a result of having learned the skills through skill-based treatment. And you've supported, sounds like, more than 300 staff in learning a different way to interact with and educate the students that they support. And it is such a huge testament to your team. And I thank you so much for outlining some of the ins and outs of this process, some of the nuances, some of the barriers, and the resources that your team was willing to put in to kind of build capacity in this way. And you mentioned the grassroots. Grassroots building of capacity and persuading, but I'm assuming that the persuasion was done at the level of positive student outcomes and
Yes.
changes in
Yeah.
perspective and staff as well. Is that right? Yeah.
Early wins. That's Dr. Hanley always talked about early wins. That there's
Yeah.
And
nothing
we were.
nothing more persuasive than seeing kids succeed in ways they hadn't before. I mean,
Mhm.
And it
There's no
seems
doubt.
little, but when you come to we always start with what are the successes? That's what I had to start with. That's what we already always start with. And those are the anecdotal things that people often, a data sheet cannot collect. The student, that's the first time they did a fire alarm and they went outside and came in with the class. When before they stayed outside for 30 minutes to an hour, and they needed to
Mhm.
call a second person because the kid was about to, like, all of those really shift. The kid walked in the hallway, went to the bathroom, came back to class. That's a quality of a life thing, that the student can go to the bathroom independently now. So
Mhm.
um some of the things that our districts were saying is like, everybody is saying these kids are learning skills. So for all the naysayers that just say the kids getting what they want all day, well, all kids deserve a good time at school. It's not Disneyland all day, but they deserve good times at school. They deserve quality interactions with people that see them as real human beings. And but it doesn't just stop there. Yeah, of course, like, be nice to kids, but our job is to teach. And almost every person in that has done this pilot said our kids are learning skills. So for the naysayers that don't think, we are teaching these kids, they are doing really well. And these kids are moving to less restrictive environments. These were the kids that were in a room by themselves, maybe 1 to 2 staff member, that are now even moving just into a special education room with other kids. We have had kids make the full jump into fully gen ed. Do they still need their specially designed instruction in reading and math? Yeah, but they don't need it for behavior. They don't
Mhm.
need a behavior or crisis safety plan. That's cool. That's
That's
real.
good.
That's real growth.
Mhm.
So
we had an end of the year event. I think it was maybe 2023, 2024, and Hillary invited all of the teams that were participating in PFA SBT to come and just talk about their kids. It was, I think we had it towards the end of May, so it was near the end of the school year. And this group of folks show up and they're presenting videos and case studies, and they're sharing success stories. And I asked our director, Lisa McConaughey, to pop in and listen. And afterwards, we're walking down the hall, and she said something I thought that was really profound. She goes, "It was remarkable to listen to a room of like 25 people talk about the children that are normally like in their successes and how excited they were, the children who are otherwise the topic of conversation around how do we get this kid out of how do we find a better place, and how do we keep staff safe? Like it's usually the conversations are usually focused on, this is awful situation. We're really struggling. What are we going to do? Instead, it was just this celebration of, and I thought that was profound. That it was this celebration of student success, and I took in that comment, and it stuck with me.
I love to hear that. We celebrate the small wins and the big wins, and you're both, CRIS is an embodiment of a big win. Um, all right, I think I just want to end. I guess I have one last question, a parting question, and then I want to maybe summarize and wrap up here. Do you think that the capacity is built? Like, do you feel like now there is enough infrastructure and support around practical function assessment, skill-based treatment, that it's likely to stick around in the schools that you support? Or do you, where do you go from here? What's next for your team?
um Brad, can I please keep doing this?
Of course.
I love this part of my job. I love the fact that and the cool thing is, like, everybody on our team is doing this now. They're seeing the success. Like, we've had districts that were because of resources and contingencies, they just jumped on board this year, and we have staff in those districts doing this work. Do I think the job is done, that we have enough people? No, because we still, like, we're still getting calls for maladaptive behavior. So that means teams still don't have the infrastructure to do this, solo, but we've created such a learning community that if you are the only, coach in a district, or you're the only sped teacher that's doing it in a district, you have friends to call upon now and go, how'd you get this done? And that is really valuable to not feeling that you're doing something alone. I think just like anything, any intervention in school, if we don't have people that are continuing to like, hey, look at the result, just like reading. I'm a big fan of teaching reading and math too. And if we don't look at the results and what interventions are working for our kids, then those start to fade out. And it's like, oh no, they can't fade out. We got to keep talking about it. Otherwise, people can sometimes default. And we want to make sure that when this tool is needed, there are people around to make sure they can have it.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of work to be done. There's this whole field of implementation science in education and special education, which has to do with like the deployment of newer technologies and their uptake and their fidelity and their sustainability. And we need some research on PFA, SBT in the schools using some of the tools of implementation science, just like was done with positive behavior supports and school-wide positive behavior supports. There's work to be done to, this is why Hillary and I went up and presented at the PBIS conference, the Northwest PBIS conference, because it just, there's all of these PBIS coordinators and folks who are running the multi-tiered systems of support, and they're rightly focused on tier 1 and tier 2. A lot of their energy goes there, and but if I had my way, I'm hoping sometime in the future that PFA SBT is integrated into in almost a formal way into like recommended tier 3 practices, rather than it being like, I heard about this, so we have work to do, right? And I'd like to see some of the research. I would love to see some folks like the research project Ron just did. Really important. I'm sorry, I can't remember Ron's last name, but
the music, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Are we talking about
his dissertation using behavior skills training around, I think it was around PFA SBT implementation in the schools. Am I right?
I think it was about universal protocols.
Universal protocol, excuse me. So we just need some of the research we need Hillary's gonna laugh. We need folks like Hillary to go back and get their PhD and spend some time focusing on PFA SBT research in a school-based context. We need a body of research around that. I think it's going to take time. I think that the Carnegie Institute years ago found that when a instructional approach reaches a point where there's enough research that has enough kind of like has minimum standards of methodological rigor to say that it's evidence-based, at that point, it takes another 10 years for it to kind of reach kind of implementation at scale. So it's a relatively slow process. But it's a process of education and awareness, and I would like to see at some point PFA SBT formally acknowledged, like in state technical assistance documents where there's guidance on supporting children with complex needs. I would like to see a page or two calling out PFA SBT, and for districts to formally find a way to kind of like, where does this fit in our, like, when do we know this kid, this is a student who meets the profile where we need to deploy this toolkit. It's not for everybody, of course. Nobody's ever said that, right? We're talking about children with really a pattern of complex, severe behavior, but it is highly effective in ways that I'm not aware of other technologies that are as effective. And so, we just keep pushing, putting it out there, but we do need more research in that. I don't know, like the kind of journals that that special education autism specialists, we need more scholars in that space to do some of the research and get it published, and so that it's PFA SBT isn't sequestered within the kind of behavior analytic community, but we just need wider dissemination across more disciplines. I don't know, and more kind of research traditions, if that makes sense.
I mean, I think everything you're saying is spot on. To me, the work that you're doing and being able to put this on YouTube is dissemination in and of itself. I hope that we can continue to, obviously we'll stay connected, but we want to know where this is, 5 years from now as well. And I just am so honored to know you both. And I think we had a few more questions kind of dialed up about how, some specific questions about how to bring this to scale, but I think you've answered all of them, both of you. You've really provided a clear picture of not only a roadmap for student success, but staff success and organizational kind of capacity building. So I just want to end by saying thank you both so much for taking your time to chat with us. And for folks who are listening, especially if you're in the school system and if you are curious about practical functional assessment and skill-based treatment, please reach out. We're happy at FTF. We're happy to have a chat with you and let you know how you can get started in the same way that Hillary and Brad got started a few years ago. And there's our info is probably down in the comments for you. So Hillary, Brad, thank you so much. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day. And I can't wait to chat with you all again soon.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
Hi, thank you.
Bye, everyone.